Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my Remix crash course. So in this video, we're going to learn all about Remix while building a blog application, also using Prisma and SQLite for a database. So before we jump into the code, I just want to talk about what Remix is and why it's beneficial. So Remix is a new framework. It has a lot of hype. It was created by the same creators of React Router. In fact, it's basically built on top of React Router. And the good news is it's not just a new framework with no purpose other than to just create another framework. It's for React developers, and it's a full stack framework that solves a lot of problems that single page applications or purely client-side apps have. Now, we do have Next.js, which also offers rendering React on the server. Next.js is a fantastic framework. I use it a lot. I have a course on it, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I do think Remix feels a bit different in the way that it does things, particularly using what are called loaders and actions, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I'm not going to compare the two. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. But I do think that we're moving away from the single page application and moving more towards building with Next.js, Remix, Nuxt for Vue, and full stack frameworks like this, or I should say server rendered applications. So as far as some of the benefits, of course, server-side rendering is huge. It has some great benefits, especially with SEO. File system routing is also great. You don't have to explicitly define all your routes. You just create a file and put it in a certain folder, and it just works as a route, similar to how old school, I shouldn't say old school, but how PHP sites work. You also have nested routes with Remix, which is pretty cool. We can use the outlet element from the React router and build a hierarchy of routes. These nested routes are server rendered, and it's almost like a hybrid of a single page application and a server-side rendered application. Now, loaders and actions, I think, really make learning Remix worth it. You get a lot of control when it comes to dealing with the request and response. Loaders are basically functions that you can put directly into your route modules, and they run on the server side. And if you need to fetch some data and load it into your page, you can do it from there. In our case, we'll be using Prisma, which is an ORM, to get data from an SQLite database, and we'll be able to put it right into our route loader or right into our page. Actions are also something that caught my eye, and if you guys have worked with PHP before, you know that when you submit an HTML form, you can make a post request with a form without JavaScript, without having to add an onSubmit handler. And Remix allows us to do that by using something called action functions. So we can actually make requests directly from HTML without JavaScript using these action functions. And we'll get into that, in a little while. So you can also have easy access to head tags from any route module. If you want to add a meta tag, like let's say keywords or description on any of your pages or any of your routes, you can do that really easily. Same thing with links. If you want a specific CSS file or CSS link in the head, you can do that really easily with Remix. Error handling is also included and really easy to use. You can export an error boundary component inside your route module, which will basically handle any error for that specific route. And you can also create a route error boundary. You also get TypeScript right out of the box. You can generate your boilerplate app with TypeScript and TSX files, or you can do it with JavaScript, and you can pick and choose which files you just want to change to TypeScript. All you have to do is change the extension. We also have built-in support for cookies and sessions, which is really cool. There's a function that Remix provides called Create Cookie. Remix has built-in support to work with sessions using cookies, the file system, server memory, or custom storage. So these are all really cool features that Remix offers. So my plan is to get a Remix app up and running and talk about what it offers and show you how loaders and actions and nested routes work, but also build a blog application at the same time where we can use Prisma, which is an ORM, and also use SQLite as our database, which you could easily switch out for Postgres or something else. So we'll get some basic functionality done today, and then probably in my next video, I want to add user authentication so people can come and they can register, sign in, create posts, and delete their own posts. We can get into cookies and sessions and all that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, so we're going to get started, and I would suggest that you follow along and code along with me. I think that's the best way to learn and to retain information, but of course it's up to you. So this is the documentation, and you can see we can get started with npx create remix, and they're telling us to use @latest, and you can do that, or you can use the version that I'm using, which is the latest at this point, is 1.0.6. So you can either use latest or you can use the version that I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and run npx create-remix @latest, and it's going to ask us some questions, the first being where we want to put this. I'm going to have a folder called remix blog. And then where do you want to deploy? So you have some options here like fly.io, Vercel, Netlify. I'm just going to choose the Remix app server. And then you have the option to use TypeScript if you want, which I probably would if I was in production, but since it's a tutorial and some people might not know anything about TypeScript, I'm going to go ahead and choose JavaScript. And yes, I want to run npm install. Okay, so that's all set. Let's cd into Remix blog, and I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code from here. And of course, you can use whatever text editor you want. So we have the files and folders I'm going to go over in a second, but let's run the dev server first. So if we open up an integrated terminal, I'm going to run npm run dev. That's the command to run this on localhost 3000. And then you should get something like this. It's just a simple demo. So if we go to like actions, it has a form where you can submit to an action function. And we're going to get into all that, but I want to basically just blow everything away, all the demo stuff, and start from scratch, because I think that that's the best way to really learn what's going on here. So let's go into the package.json, and you'll see under dependencies, we have React, we have React DOM, and then we have Remix. And we also have this Remix run React, Remix run serve, and then the dev script that we just ran, so npm run dev. npm run build will build for production, and it actually creates two build folders, one in the root, which is the server files, and then one in public as well, which is the client. So the public folder you can use for static assets like images, fonts, etc. But most of the stuff that we'll be doing is going to be in this app folder. Okay, so this is basically our application. So let's go through some of this. The entry files here, entry client, entry server, are really just that. They're the entry points. This one here, entry.client, this is going to be the JavaScript, the first JavaScript that's run when our app is ran in the browser. And you can see we're using React DOM here, and it basically hydrates our React components. And then entry.server, this is going to be ran basically when we make our request to the server. Remix handles the loading of the data, and we're responsible for sending back a response. And that's one of the reasons I really like Remix, is the amount of control that we get when it comes to the whole request response cycle. Now the routes folder, this is going to be where our route modules go, which are basically just React components, functions. And I'll get into how the nested routing works and all that in a little bit. Styles, so we have a global CSS, and you can also create style sheets for specific routes. And then we have the root JSX, which is basically our root app component. And there's kind of a lot going on here. So what I want to do, and what I want you to do if you're following along, is just to get rid of everything here in the root and save. So this is going to give us an error. It says root has no component. Please add a default export in the route module file. So we're going to go ahead and add an export. We want to export as default a function called app. And then in here I'm just going to return, and this returns JSX. It's just a React component. If I put an H1 in here and just say my app, and we save that, we come over here and reload, we should see my app. All right, and I'm just going to resize these. So if I view the source of this, all we see is a doc type and an H1. That's it. There's no HTML, head, body tags, nothing. And we have complete access to that root document. So in this app function, that's where we want to put that stuff. So we want an HTML tag. Let's put a lang, set that to en. And I don't know why this didn't change too. So HTML. And then inside that, we're going to want our head tags. and then I'll just put a title tag in here. We'll say my remix blog, and then let's that's all I want in the head for now. Then we'll have our body. Now in the body we're going to have an outlet. So the outlet is basically whatever route we're on, whatever route module, that's going to be output here. Now we do have to bring that in. So let's go up here and let's say import outlet, which is part of React Router DOM, but Remix is actually built on top of React Router DOM. So we're bringing this in from Remix. Okay, so if I go ahead and save that, we're now seeing the index page again, which is in the routes index file. Now before we get into routes, there's a couple other things I want to show you. So one, if we want to have live reload, so if I go ahead and just type in hello here, and then if I do hello 1 and save, you'll see it's not reloading automatically. So we want to bring in live reload from Remix, and what we'll do is right under the outlet we'll have an expression, and we'll say with a process.env.nodeEnv, where the node environment is equal to development. When that's true, then we want to have our live reload, else then we're just going to say null. Alright, so now you'll see if I change that 1 to a 2 and save, now it auto reloads. If I get rid of it and save, it goes away. Now instead of putting all the document stuff here, like the head, body, HTML, and right inside the app component, what we're going to do is have a function called document. And that document is going to take in an object with children, because we want to be able to wrap this document around something. So it's going to take in children, and we'll also pass in title. And then what I'm going to do is take everything from within here and cut it, and we want to then return, we're going to return, and then I'm going to paste that in here. Now instead of the outlet in the document, we're going to put the children, okay? Because whatever we wrap this around, we want that to output here. All right, and then up here we can simply put the document, and then we want to have the outlet. All right, so if I save that, we should get the same result. And we could do for the title, we could do something like if title, then title, else then my remix blog. I don't know why I put my. I'm going to change that. Okay, so we'll save that. Good. Now the next thing I want to do is create a layout, because we might want to have, or we will want to have so a little bit of navigation on the page. And I could put it up here, like whatever I put in here is going to be on every route. If I go to this route, we're still going to see that hello. So I could do it here, but a nicer way to do this, and what they had before I deleted it, was just a layout component that we could wrap around the outlet. So let's do that. Let's create another function called layout, which is going to take in children, because we want to be able to wrap it around something. And from here, let's return, I'm just going to return an empty fragment, and then we'll have a nav with the class of navbar. And you're going to want to copy these classes, because I have a global style sheet that I'm going to be bringing in as well. So in the navbar, I want to have the logo. It's just going to be text, but I want to wrap it in a link. And instead of using an A tag, it's going to be an inner link. So we actually want to use link from Remix, not from React Router DOM, but from Remix. So I'm going to auto import that. So now link's being brought in. So, and it's used the same way. We just add a to attribute. This is just going to go to slash, and I'm also going to give it a class name of logo. And then here we'll say remix. Okay, now we're not going to see anything just yet, because all we've done is created the function, but I just want to finish this up. So in addition to the logo, we're going to have UL. I'm going to give this a class of nav with a list item that's going to have a link to, and that's going to be to slash posts, and we'll say posts. And then under the nav, we'll just have a container class and that's where we want to put the children. Okay, so whatever we wrap it around. Now we can come up here into our app and we can just wrap the outlet in the layout. Okay, so we'll save that. Now we can see the logo and the link, which doesn't look too good because we have no CSS. Now I'm going to show you how we can add some styles, but I just want to clear some things up first. So in routes, there's a folder called demos. I'm going to completely delete that. And then in styles, I'm going to delete that demos, the demos folder. And then I'm also going to delete the dark CSS. And in global CSS, I have some styles I'm going to paste in, and you can grab this from the repository in the description. So I'm just going to paste those in, and we'll save. And then let's go into the routes index.jsx here, and I'm just going to clear all that up, and we just want to create just a basic function, a React component that returns JSX. And I'm using this extension here. A lot of you guys probably use it. This ES7 React Redux React Native snippets, and it just allows me to generate React components. I like to use just a regular function with the export at the bottom, which is RFCE. Okay, now I don't want to import React at the top because it's no longer needed. So with this component, you can just add an underscore RFCE enter, and then it gives you the function without the import. And I'm just going to call this home. Okay, and then we'll just have an H1 in here, and we'll just say welcome for now. Okay, so now we just have this showing. Now the styles, even though I put the global styles in, they're not showing up because we haven't put them anywhere, right? So I want to show you, if we go to the root JSX, I want to bring in the global style sheet. So we'll say import, let's say global styles URL, and we're going to import that from. Now we can actually use the tilde here. That's just like the root. So we'll say, or not the root, but the app folder. So from there we want to go to, where we go, styles, styles, and then global.css. So we're bringing the file in. Now what I could do, since I'm in the root here and I have access to the head tags, I could just go ahead and put link in here and set the href to that global styles URL. If I save that, you'll see that now the styles take effect. However, if I'm in another route module and I want to load another style sheet, I won't be able to do it this way. So what we can do, let's get rid of that, and what we can do is bring in from Remix, we can bring in links, and we can put that links element in the head. So I'm going to put it right above the title, links, and then all we have to do from any route module, we can just export a new function called links. I'm going to use an arrow function, and all this has to return is an array with an object that has a rel. In this case, we want this to be style sheet, and then just an href, and we can set that to our global styles URL. If I save that, now you can see that the styles take effect. So I could put this in any component loading any style sheet, and then similar to that, we can do the same with meta tags. So in some cases, you'll have meta tags where you're going to want the same ones on every page. So for example, I'll paste in the character set and the viewport, but like keywords and description, you're going to want that to be different on on every route. So we can bring in meta, which works in a similar way. I'm going to put this right here. We'll just say meta, and then in any route module, we can create or export a function called meta, and what we want that to do is return an object with whatever meta tag we want. We could say description, and then we can set it here, or I'm just going to create a variable up here. So description, and we'll set it to, we'll say a cool blog built with Remix. And then we could do keywords, so const keywords, oops, and set that to, we'll just say Remix, React, JavaScript, doesn't matter. And then we'll add keywords to the return here. Okay, and then that should do it. So I'll save. Keywords is not defined. I don't know what is up with my typing. Okay, now if I look in the source code for this, if we check this out, we have the viewport and what was the other one? The character set. And then we also have the description right here. You can see the description and the keywords. So any meta tags you want to set on other pages, you can do here, which obviously is good for just SEO. So now we're going to start to look at routing. So I'm going to close up the root file for now. And right now we just have the routes folder with this one index.js, and this file isn't going to do much. It's just the home page. So I'm just going to have an H1 and paragraph in here. And you guys can put whatever you want on this. But let's go ahead and create in routes a file called posts.jsx. Okay, now the routes, these route modules are just basically component functions. So we're going to just generate a function here. And I'm going to call this posts. And for now, let's just put an H1. We'll say this is the posts route. And then I'm just going to go to /post. We already have a link here, and it just works. So similar to like how Next.js works, it's file system based routing. So you don't have to go and manually create your routes with React Router DOM, although you can do that because that's included with Remix. You can explicitly set your routes, or you can just put pages right in and they just work. Now you do also have nested routing, which is pretty cool. So in the routes folder, I'm going to create another folder called posts. So I'm matching the name of this post file here, and then I can nest routes within this file. So I do that with the outlet from Remix, but also from React Router DOM. So let's import the outlet from Remix. And then down here under the H1, I'm going to put the outlet. Okay, so now if I create in my post folder, let's create a file called new.jsx, and let's just create a function here. We'll call it new post, and then we'll have an H1 in here, and we'll say new post, and I'll save that. And then let's go over to the browser, and let's go to post/new. And it shows the content that's in new post, but it still also shows the content that's in the main post file because I'm nesting this new route into this post route. Okay, so anything I create in this post folder, it'll show, but it'll also show what's in the parent route, which is pretty cool. You could have like a post only navigation that you only want to show on the post routes. Now, in our situation for this particular app, we don't need to put anything else in the parent post. So I'm just going to leave it as an outlet, and we'll just use a fragment here. But we'll keep it this way, just so if you want to add something here, you can, and it will show on all posts. Now, since I do want to have a just /posts, what we can do is in the post folder, just create an index.js, index.jsx or TSX if you're using TypeScript. And then we'll go ahead and create a function. That didn't work for some reason. And we'll create a function called, we'll call it post items, because that's what we're going to do here is list post items. And then we'll have an H1, and we'll just say posts. So now if we come over here and reload, we're at /posts. We should just see posts. And we also have the new, post/new. And then there's one other route that I'm going to want to add, and that's to show the single post. Now with that, the URL that I want is post/ and then whatever, some kind of ID like this. And we'll go over error handling in a bit too. But it's going to be just some ID, so this is going to be dynamic. So the way that we can handle that is by creating a new file in the post folder, and we're going to use a money sign because this is basically like a dynamic, like a variable route. And then we want to call it whatever we want to name that param. In this case, it's going to be post ID.jsx. So money sign post ID JSX. And then we're going to create a function, and we'll just call this post. And then down here, we'll just say post. Actually, we'll make this an H1 and say post. So now if I go to post/ and then whatever, a bunch of numbers, it shows me this content. Now, if I want to grab this, which I'm going to want to later so we can get a single post from the database, we can just use the use params hook, okay, which is the same as with React Router DOM. So use params, I'm going to bring that in from Remix, and then we just, above the return, create params and set that to use params. And then down here, if I wanted to output that, I could just do params dot and then post ID. And the reason it's post ID is because that's what I called the name of the file. That's what I called the param. So now we'll get post slash whatever I put here. If I put 1, we get post 1. All right, so at least now we have our routes created. They don't do much, but we have them created. And now we're going to look at one of the coolest features about Remix, which are loaders. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep open the posts index. So it's in the post folder, the index.js, and we want to use what's called a loader, and it's used to do that. It's used to load data, and that could be from a database, like ultimately we're going to do, but it could also be from an API. It could be anything really, anything that you want to load when the page loads. So up here we want to import a hook called use loader data. And that's going to be from Remix. All right, so we have the hook, and then to create a loader, we just export a function called loader, and then this has to return something. So for now, I'm just going to return an empty object, and I just want to do a console log here. I'll just console log 1, 2, 3, and you'll notice that it logs down here. And the reason for that, it doesn't log in the browser console, it logs here because loader runs on the server. Okay, so you can do your server-side stuff right in this function. And the idea is you do your server stuff, you get your data, and then you can use this hook down here in your function to access it on the client. So ultimately, like I said, we're going to use a database. We're going to use Prisma with SQLite, but just for now, I'm going to create just some hard-coded data. So this will be an object, and let's do posts with an array of objects that'll have an ID. We'll do an ID, a title, say post 1, and we'll do a body. And for body, we'll say this is a test post. And then I'm just going to copy this down. We'll do 3 of them, and then we'll just change the titles here. So this will be 2, 3, and then we'll change the IDs. So 2, 3, and then I'm just going to go ahead and return this data. Now, like I said, we access this data now with this use loader data hook. So we come down here above the return, and we can say const data, set that to use loader data, and now we'll come down. Actually, we can destructure this. We can just take the posts out of the data, and then we should be able to take our posts, map through them just like any React component. So we'll say for each post, we want to then, let's render a list. Yeah, let's wrap this actually in a UL. We'll say UL will give us a class of post-list, because we do have some classes we can use to make this look decent. And we'll take this and we'll put this in here. Okay, and then we want to map through each one and render a list item, and this has to have a unique key. So the key will set to the post.id, and then in here we'll do let's have a link. We need to bring that in from Remix. So the link will say 2, and for now we'll do post.id, and we'll put an H3 in here. This will be the post.title. And then under that we'll have, we're going to have the date, the created at, but we don't have that yet because it's just dummy data. So let's just save that as is. And you can see we get our post 1, 2, 3. And the styling is just from the global style sheet. All right, so I mean, and right now, obviously it's just hard-coded data, but it can be from a database. Later on, we're going to pull it from a MySQL, not MySQL, an SQLite database using Prisma. So I just want to kind of format this a little better. This H1, we're going to have a div up here with the class of page-header. And the div, this wrapping div, we can just use a a fragment, and then I'm going to move this H1 in here, and then underneath that we'll have a link, and this is going to go to the new page. So we'll say to/post/new, and I'm also going to just give this a class name of btn, and then here we'll say new post. So we'll save that, and then we have a nice little post page. So loaders are pretty powerful because they run server side, so we can do a lot more right from the same file that we have our output in, which is, I think, really valuable. Now there's also something called actions, where usually you have a form. Say we have a React app or Angular or whatever. You have a form. You have an onSubmit function that actually stops the form from naturally submitting to a file in the browser to catch it and then do something in JavaScript. Well, with Remix, we have something called actions, where we can really submit the form. So we're going to have a form. We can actually submit it to the server without having to add an onClick, and we can catch it in something called an action function. So we're going to go to new JSX, to this new post, and let's first just build out the form. It's not going to be too bad. It's just two fields, a title and a body. So we'll go ahead and let's add a page header here. So page header, we're going to move this up here, and then we're just going to have a back button or back link. So I'm going to import this from Remix, and this is going to go to just /posts, and we'll give it a class name of btn and btn reverse, and it's just going to say back. So if we look at that, now we just have this back button here. And then down here under the page header, let's create, we'll say page-content, and this is where we're going to have our form. Now this action, we could use this, but since we're submitting to the same page, we don't need the action, but we also don't need an onSubmit. In fact, we need to make sure that we set the method here to post, because we want to make a post request. And this might, if you used to be a PHP developer like me, this looks very, it's very familiar. So, or if you are a PHP developer. So let's create a form control class here, and then we're going to have a label. This is going to be for the title, and then underneath that we'll have an input, and it's going to be type text, and then we're going to use a name. When's the last time you actually needed a name? So name is going to be title, because that's how we can access it in the action, and then it's going to have, let's do an ID of title as well. And then we're just going to have the body, so we'll just copy this down, and we'll change this to body, and we'll say post body. We'll change this, and the title, the ID to body. Actually, you know what? I want this to be a text area. So we'll say text area. Okay. So if I save that, we should see the two fields. Now we just need a button. So let's do button. We'll give it a class of btn and btn-block. And yeah, and here we'll just say add post. And we'll just make sure we add a type here of submit, because we want to make sure this submits the form. Okay, now to create an action, very simple, just like a loader, we just create a function, an exported function. So we want to do export const and call it action. All right, and this has to return something, so we're going to actually bring in redirect from Remix. So lots of little tools to help you here. So we want to return redirect, and we're going to redirect to, let's just say /posts. Okay, now I just want to show you, if I console log here, we'll do 1, 2, 3 again, and then I come over here and I submit this form, we should see down here in the server console, you should see 1, 2, 3. All right, so we're able to submit to the server, and we can do whatever we want in here. Now action, it should take in an object with a request. So that's the server request or the HTTP request. And the way that we get these fields, so obviously we're going to need to get this data right from the form. We simply create a form variable, and we can set that to await, because this is going to return a promise. So we want to await request Actually, this should be asynchronous. So async and then request.formData. And if we just want to see what that looks like, we could console log it. So if we submit that and then we look down here, you'll see it's a remix form data object, and it has these URL search params with title and body. Now obviously we want each value, so what we'll do is come up here and we'll say const title. We'll say title, and the way that we can get that is with the get method. So form.get, and we want to get the title, and we'll do the same with the body. All right, and then what we'll do is, we'll create an object called fields, and we'll say title, body, and then we'll just console log here. We'll console log those fields. Okay, so now if we come over here and we submit and we add post, if we look down here, we should see right here an object with the title and the body. All right, so I mean, all we have to do now, we'll just put a to do here and say submit to database, and we'll do that in a little bit. Before we do, I want to show you how we can handle errors, because Remix is actually really good with errors using this error boundary. So if we look right here in the docs, it says Remix sets a new precedent in error handling, and it automatically catches most errors in your code. So this is really helpful, and it actually does a lot for us in terms of throwing errors and catching them. And all we have to do is add an error boundary, and we can do that within the route module. We can also add a root error boundary. So first I'll show you how we can do it here, and let's throw an error on purpose. So on the form page here, on the new.jsx, it has to return something. So I'm just going to comment out the return and then submit. And we get this weird cannot read property route of undefined in server.js, like who knows what the hell that means. So let's create down here at the bottom, we'll create an error boundary. So we can do that by, actually we want to go above the export, and let's say export function error boundary. Okay, and then this is going to take in an object with an error. And from this, we could console log the error, so we have it in the console, but then we want to return what we want on the page. So that's going to be, in this case, we'll just do a div, and it's not working for that. So a div, and then we'll do an h1, and we'll say error, and then underneath that we'll do a pre-tag, and then we'll have that error object has a message on it. So we'll do error.message. So that should work. If we come back here and we try to submit again with that, with nothing being returned, now you see we get error. You defined an action for route, but didn't return anything from your action. Actually, let's put that in a paragraph. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so now we have a nice clear error message. Now, like the documentation said, you can have a root error boundary, and you can have both, but what I'm going to do is just take this out of there and put it into the root JSX. So we'll open that up. I'll go down to the bottom of that page and paste that in. Now, if I try this again, I just want to show you, if I try this again, it does show me the error, but notice the whole layout's gone, because we're just, from the root, we just have a div and this and that. What we can do though is change this to our document and then have our layout around it. All right, so we'll just take this, move that into our layout, and now it should, if we get an error now we have the layout around it. And that's going to work for all routes. And of course you could put the error boundary if you wanted to do something specific on a specific route, because it's going to look for the closest error boundary. All right, so now that we've talked about actions and loaders and routes and all that. I want to now get into the database stuff. So we're going to be using something called Prisma, and I'll just do a kind of a quick intro to that for those of you that have never used it. So it's an ORM, or an object relational mapper, and it's basically, you can think of it as an abstract or a layer that sits over your database, whether that's SQLite like we're going to use, or Postgres or whatever, and it gives you an easy syntax to use to make queries to that database. So it's like Mongoose. If you guys have used MongoDB with Mongoose, it makes it easier. You create your model, and then you can do a syntax like this. So this is just Prisma dot, and then whatever the table dot create in this case, and then just pass in an object of data. So really nice syntax, easy to use. And if you want to switch from SQLite to something like Postgres, you just change the config. Everything else stays the same. So really cool, and goes really well with this type of framework. So let's go ahead and install a couple things. I'm going to close these files up, and I'm going to just stop this, and we want to npm install Prisma, and then we also want the client, so it's at Prisma/client. So we want to get those installed. Then we want to, we'll go ahead and clear this up and run npx Prisma, and we want to run init, and we want to provide a data source provider. So we're going to say --data source provider, and like I said, we're going to be using SQLite, so we just want to do space and then SQLite, and that should go ahead and create a schema. So over here now in our file structure, we have a folder called Prisma, and we have this schema.prisma file. So this file is where we add our models. All right, so basically whatever like tables you're going to have, you're going to put here. So we're just going to have a post table. I'm most likely going to do a video where we add authentication to this. Then we'll add a users table or users model. But for now, we're just going to do model post. And we want to set a few fields here. So let's do ID. We're going to set that to a string. So that's the type. And then we can do @ID, which I believe makes this the primary key. And we can also set a default. So we're going to say default and pass in here UUID parentheses. That's going to create an ID automatically for us in the format of a UUID. And then let's do title. So title will be string. It's just, yeah. So title string, we don't need a default value. And then body will be a string. And then we're also going to do created at. So created at is going to be date time. And for created at, I'm going to want the current date and time for the default. So let's say at default, and then we can pass in here now with parentheses. And then finally I want an updated at, and that's also going to be date time. And we can use this at updated at, and what that'll do is it'll add whatever the date and time is when we update in a post in the database. So we'll go ahead and save that, and then we want to push that onto our database. So down here in the console, let's clear this up, and I believe it's npx Prisma DB push. Okay, so now it says SQLite database dev DB created. All right, and if we look in our Prisma folder, now we have this dev.db. And I have an SQLite extension, so I forget how to use it though. Oh yeah, I have it right here. So if you have it installed, just search for SQLite in your extensions, install it, and you can search for it here, and then just open database dev.db, and it should show up. I thought it showed up down here. My microphone's in my way. So right here, dev.db, and if we look, we now have a post table with, with those values, not values, those fields. All right, so now I want to create a database seeder so that we can get some posts in there. So to do that, we're going to create a file in the, whoops, let's close these up. We're going to create a file in the Prisma folder called seed.js. And let's see, the dev.db, you should add that to your git ignore. So I'm just going to do that real quick. So let's say Prisma, so we'll do /prisma/dev.db. Just add that so it doesn't get added to your repo. All right, and then in the seed file here, we're going to bring in, since this is run on the server and I'm not using TypeScript, we're going to use the common JS syntax. So let's say Prisma client, and that's going to be from at Prisma client. So we want to bring that in. Let's close that up. And then let's say const db, set that to new Prisma client. And then we're going to have a simple function called getPosts. And all this is going to do is return an array of like 4 posts. Let me just grab those real quick, because we want to get these posts in the database. So this function is just going to return them. And you can either grab these from the repository file, or you can just copy just some posts with a title and body. And then what we'll do is create an asynchronous function called seed. Oops. And we're going to await promise.all. And in here we're going to have get posts, and then we want to do a .map and say for each post we want to put them in the database. So we want to return here, let's say DB, that's our database, and then post is our model or our table, and then we want to create, and we're going to pass in an object and set data to the post. So we're just mapping through, looping through our posts, and you know, putting each one in the database. And then we just want to run that seed function here. All right, so now we can actually run this. If we come down here, we can say node prisma/seed, and that should have ran the file. And now if we look at, actually we don't even need that SQLite thing, because Prisma has a tool. I think we can do npx Prisma Studio, and on localhost 555 you'll see here we have under all models we have posts, and there we go. So we have our 4 posts in there. Yeah, so Prisma is really cool. I plan on doing a video just all on Prisma, but let's go ahead and stop that. Whoops, did our server stop? I think it did. Okay, let's just make sure this is running. All right, now that seed, we can also add a Prisma script in our package.json. So in here we can go above the scripts and do Prisma, and we'll do right here we'll say seed, and then we want to run node Prisma/seed, and just make sure we put a comma here. All right, so we're almost ready to use our database. There's one more file that we need to create. So that's going to go in, actually we're going to create inside of our app folder a folder called utils, util. I don't know what's wrong with my typing today. So in utils we're going to create a file called db.server, and we're actually going to use TypeScript for this. So we're going to do a .ts extension, and adding this .server, we don't need this, but what this does is it enforces Remix to run this server side. Okay, so that's why we did the .server. And then here, since we use TypeScript, we can still use the import syntax, and let's say Prisma client. We're going to bring that in. Then we're going to we're actually going to declare a global scope. So this is TypeScript. So we're going to declare a global scope, and then actually I think we need to this is from the documentation. I believe we have to set that and then set it to a type of Prisma client, and then in the global scope we do var and then $_db, which the type we're going to set to Prisma client or undefined. And then we want to check to see our environment. And the reason we're creating this file is because in development we don't want to restart the server with every change, but we also don't want to create a new connection with every change. So this is going to stop it from doing that. So we're going to check the process.env.node.env, and we'll say if that is equal to production, then we're simply going to say db, set that to a new Prisma client, and then db dot, and then we can do money sign connect, so that will connect. Okay, else, so if we're in development, then we're going to say if not, and then the global, so that global namespace dot $_db. So we'll say if not, then we want to then connect with that. So global dot $_db, set that to new Prisma client, and then global dot $_db, and we want to then dot money sign connect. And then right under that if statement, we're just going to set db to that global dot $_db. Okay, and then we just want to export that db object. So now this db, we can bring this file into any route where we want to use the database, and we can then use that db variable to create or read or whatever it is we want to do. So the first thing, let's go to our posts index. So all that database stuff should be all set. I know that was kind of weird. But let's go into routes, and then let's go into posts, and then index.js, where we just have our dummy data. And then this is where we're going to want to get the post from the database. So let's import db, and that's going to be from we'll use the tilde, so from the app folder, and then utils, and then db.server. We just save that, make sure we get no weird errors. Alright, so we're able to bring that in. Now instead of just defining the post like we did here, actually we're just going to replace this array. So we'll get rid of that, and instead we're going to await, because this is asynchronous, so we need to set this function, this loader, to async, and then we're going to await db.post.findMany, okay, because we want to find many. We don't have to put anything in here, but I just want to show you we can add some options. For instance, we can say take 20, so it'll just basically fetch 20 posts. We can select specific fields if we want. Oops. So let's say ID true, title true, and let's say created at true. We don't need the body because remember, this is just for this page, for the list. We're not going to show the body here. So we can do that, and then we can also order. We can say order by, and we'll order by created at, and we'll order it descending. Okay, so now we're getting it from the database, putting it in this data.posts, and then we're still getting it down here. So if I save this, there we go. Now we're actually pulling the data from the database. Now I do want to just add the date underneath as well. So let's go down here, and where we have the title, we'll go right underneath that, and let's open up an expression here, and we'll say new date, just to format this, and we'll pass in post.createdAt, and then we'll add on to this .toLocale string. So if I save that, now we can see the dates. All right, cool. Now let's work on creating a new post. So we're actually done with this. We can close that up. Let's go into the new JSX. And right now we're just submitting. We're able to, get the data, but we're not doing anything with it. So let's bring in our DB file. So we want to import that from utils/db server, and then let's I never uncommented that. So right here we want to add it to the database, and we're not doing like a ton of error checking and stuff like that. I might add that later on, but this is getting kind of long, so I just want to get our CRUD functionality, or at least our CRD functionality. We probably won't do the updating in this video, but let's say const post, and we'll set this to await db.post.create, and then I'm going to create, just like we did in the seed, we're just going to set data, and we're going to set that to fields, okay, title and body, the created at and all that, that'll get set on its own. And then when we redirect, instead of redirecting to post, let's redirect to post/, and we'll actually use a template string here so that we can go to post/ and then post.id. So let's go to new post. Okay, we'll add post, and there we go. It brings us to the post page, which all we're doing there is just showing the ID. So we'll get to that. What we're going to want to do is fetch fetch the single post. But now at least we can see it here. We can go to each one. So now let's take care of the single page. So we'll close that up. We'll go to our money sign post ID, because that's what we're seeing here. And let's go ahead and bring in from Remix. We're going to want to use a loader. So let's say use loader data. And we don't even need the use params, because the loader, we can get the params from the loader, so we don't need this. Just get rid of this for now. And then let's export a function called loader. So we want that to be an async function. All right, and then all we want to get from here, we're going to destructure this property and get the params, or this object. And then let's say const post. We'll set that to await, and then we need our DB file, so let's be sure to bring that in. So that's going to be from utils/db server, and then let's await db.post. And we're going to use find unique. So find unique, and we're going to pass in here an object and say where, and we'll say where the ID. We'll say where the ID is equal to params dot and then post ID. Okay, so whatever the URL is. And then here we'll say if, I guess we could have done this in the other one too. We'll say if not post, then we'll throw a new error. Let's say post not found. And then otherwise we'll set const data, and we'll set that to, we'll have post in there so we can get that, and we'll return data. So then down here we can use that hook. We'll say const data, actually we'll destructure that, and we'll get the post from use loader data. And then this h1, I should be able to output the post.title. And there we go. So I'm just gonna add the page header here, and then we'll move this h1 into here, and then let's just do a back button or backlink. So we'll do link, bring it in from Remix to, we'll say to/posts, and we'll give it a class name of btn and btn reverse, and say back. Okay, and then for the body, we'll go underneath the page header. Let's say page dash content, and this is where we want to put the body, so we'll just do post dot body. All right, cool. Now let's do the delete. So I want to have a delete button. So on this post ID page, what we're going to do is add under the page content, we'll do page dash footer. Now this is a little weird. We could add a delete event, but we can also just submit a form and just add a hidden field letting Remix know that it's a delete request, because I mean normally you can only do a post or a get with a form. So let's go ahead and add a form, and we're going to specify here that we want the method to be a post request, because it's going to actually get submitted as a post request. But then we just add in what the hell's that? We just add an input here, and it's going to be the type of hidden, and then the name we want to set that to underscore method, and then the value we're going to set to delete. So that's going to let the server know that we want to make this a delete request. And then we just want to have a button. I'm going to give it a class of btn and btn dash delete, and we'll say delete. Let's go ahead and save that. So now we have a delete button here. And then the way that we handle this is with an action. So let's go up here, we'll go under the loader, and let's say export const action. We're going to set this to async. Okay, and then we're going to do const form await request dot form data, just like we did in the new form. Now to check the method, what we can do is say if form.get, and then we can check underscore method. So if form.get underscore method is equal to delete, then we want to delete the post. So let's do const. Actually, we can just copy this right here. So we'll go ahead and just copy that and put that right in here in the conditional. And then underneath that, we'll say await db.post.delete, and this just takes in an object with a where clause. So we'll say where, and then we'll say where ID is equal to the params dot post ID. Now params we need to bring in up here in the action, just like we did with the loader. So just pass that in, params. Actually we need request too. So let's say request and params, because we use request right here, which I misspelled. All right, so we're deleting where the post ID, and then after that we'll go ahead and just redirect. So we'll return redirect, which is brought in from Remix. Did I bring it in? Yeah. So return redirect, and we'll go to /post. All right, so let's come over here, let's hit delete, and now the test post is gone. Awesome. So back, there we go, we get that post there, delete, and now it's gone. All right, so I mean, we went over a lot here, and I hope that you can see the value in this framework, rather than having a completely separate back-end, Express server or whatever, and then having a single page application. You have one framework where you can manage everything, and I think it's really useful. I do, and I think it's the future of React. This and Next.js, I think server-side rendering is definitely the future. And it's funny, I've seen a lot of videos and articles that have really said that we're kind of going back to the old days, where we used PHP and we submitted the server, we submitted forms to the actual server, and everything was rendered on the server. So I like it. I like the direction we're headed. But that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I will try to get the next video up soon, where we add user authentication to this. So I'll try to get to that soon, and that's it. Thanks for watching.